Report. I'm Nick Valencia, the host of this discussion, founder of Nick Valencia Live, and I think one of the top new media journalists in the country here, which is why we are here hosting this discussion to talk about what people are doing nationally. Looking at the through lines to connect the fight on the movement of the front line from New Hampshire to California and everywhere in between. And I want to start here. We have a great lineup of guests here, from Representative Wendy Thomas to Representative Ro Khanna, a member of the U.S. Congress. But we start in New Hampshire, where they are having tremendous success at fighting back against ICE. And we are joined by three of those people here on the front line, including the founder of Project World Cup Spotlight, which we are spotlighting today. And we have joining us Representative Wendy Thomas. She is a New Hampshire state representative and co-founder of No ICE in New Hampshire. Hello, Ms. Thomas. Joe Jordan, community organizer and co-founder as well of No ICE in New Hampshire. And Kim Herdman Shapiro. She is the national coordinator, for the reason that we're all here, with Project World Cup Spotlight and the co-founder of No ICE in New Hampshire. We give the first question to Joe and to Wendy. You've had a major victory against ICE in New Hampshire. We're looking at a blueprint here. What successes have you had, and really, how can other towns be saved from having a similar fight?
So thank you, Nick. Welcome to everyone that's watching this right now. What we had was the threat of an ICE warehouse in the town of Merrimack, New Hampshire. Merrimack's not terribly big, but we had to spin and address all of this very quickly. And so what I'm here to point out is the fact that this is possible to replicate elsewhere in the country. Protests, phone calls, postcards, they all have their place, but sometimes you just have to go further. And so what we did in Merrimack was we gave structure and direction to that energy that was going on. Over the past year, people have been told, get out there, protest, and then they wanted more. What do I do with it's more? Well, go get to know your neighbors. And so book clubs and Saturday morning coffees only get you so far.
Sure.
And so what we're looking at is pressure campaigns. And if I could have the first image up, pressure on the subject from all directions is really very important. And I want to point out to you that all of these images will be available to you after this on both the No ICE New Hampshire website as well as the Project World Cup Spotlight website.
And Joe, what kind of pressure have you found to be the most effective here as you talk about this image that you're showing?
What kind of pressure? Well, it's coordinated and serialized, so it's got to be consistent. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing, but as long as they know that they're on the spot and you're watching them and everyone else is watching them, that's really very important. So it's that coordinated effort. And you want to leverage your contacts. You want to pull in groups with expertise. And so that's where we get into the coalition of teams. So if I could have the second image, that would be fabulous. And that coalition of teams is how you pull it off. Go out there and find the people with the expertise. I'm not an attorney. I can't answer legal questions, but I know that there are attorneys out there that can. And that's the important thing. You don't have to wear all of the hats at the same time. Immigration issues are also environmental issues. They are also safety issues. They are also economic issues. So pull in everyone that you can, and you'd be amazed at how many different organizations are actually aligned with you. And then it becomes a question of, okay, I've got all of these contacts and everything. How do I get this done? And that goes on to my third image there, which don't read it now, don't even try. But if you set up groups that are teams within your coalition to work on specific angles of this whole process, that's really important. You've got to delegate. You can't do it all yourself.
People have to have
And
lanes.
some,
There sort of needs to be some directive and sort of lanes for each individual. This coalition needs to be sort of a matrix approach, a patchwork approach.
and because so much of this is volunteering, that is, you have to take the energy that they're giving you and the passion that they have and give it direction. So the people that have the media passion and experience, you want them specializing in the media field.
Mm-hmm.
And for your in-person events, I want to point out a couple of things. You really want a medical health safety team. Okay. Some people may wear multiple hats, some people may specialize, but you want that. You want to have a local liaison, turned out to be critical in Merrimack. Just someone going and talking to the mayor, talking to the chief of police, getting us parking space. You know, these are the things that get handled. Um, Planning and documentation, you want to go through your lessons learned afterwards in order to roll all of those lessons in. It's not about faults, anything like that. It's, okay, what did we learn here? Where can we do this better? Because we're going to have to do something else, and we want to learn from this and move forward better, more effectively. That's really where it is.
And if you're just joining us, you are hearing now from Jo Jordan, who is fighting ICE on the ground in New Hampshire, along with her peer and colleague, State Representative Wendy Thomas, as well as the co-founder of Project World Cup Spotlight, Kim Herdman Shapiro, who we'll hear from in just a minute. We pivot to you, Representative Thomas. We say at NVN, solo el pueblo salva al pueblo, which translates into only the people will save each other. You have seen your community step up, the people step up of New Hampshire. You have some successes that you want to lay out for those watching. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for having me here tonight. So in New Hampshire, we're currently taking the lessons that we've learned in our fight against the ICE facility, and we're now using these same lessons against the rise of potential data centers in New Hampshire. It's the same sort of fight that we're going against, which is people and rights are just being ignored. And so this is what we used when we fought against the ICE facility in New Hampshire that worked. Number one, the tent is big. So some things are nonpartisan, and a threat to your community is definitely one of them. So when we did our messaging, we always included the moral aspect, which it was that human rights were violated, and there was the social justice part of this. But to bring in the other part of the messaging, we always included that there was an economic cost to this warehouse to our town. There was a cost to infrastructure. There was a
And
cost to
that's
road
so
repair.
important, Representative, because people may agree with the punishment. They see this as the consequence for breaking the law. But when you start talking about waste, fraud, wasteful spending, this is where people on the other side, or people who may agree with this, you get their attention.
Well, that's exactly it. So we got both groups. We talked about the morality as well as the cost. The second thing that we did is that we controlled the narrative, and it became less about a warehouse and more about our identity. So we started changing the narrative to what kind of a town are we, and what kind of a state are we, and we changed the conversation to um, what is being built, to what does this say about us as a
Wow.
community and as a state. So we controlled that narrative. We didn't let them establish the narrative. The third thing that we did, and Jo sort of alluded to it, we were relentless. Timelines shift, agencies stalls, officials deflect, but our plan was to do something every week. We wanted to keep the pressure on. So we were in the news every week. We had a rally, we had a press release, we had an article, we had an op-ed. We wanted to make sure that we were in their face, and we wanted to sustain the momentum. And so bureaucracies, they rely on fatigue, but organized communities can outlast them every single time.
And that consistency is such a major key to success in any aspect, any industry, is just showing up and continuing to show up. I pivot now to our Project World Cup lead here. Kim, we talk about the narrative that is taking hold. State Representative Wendy Thomas just talked about maybe the message to others is that we're okay with what's happening here in America. we have a lot of people from outside of this country, this continent, coming here for the World Cup very, very soon. What kind of message is the world receiving right now from the United States?
Um, I think that very much they're receiving the Trump administration message, which is that everything is wonderful and there's going to be this gorgeous ballroom and it's the 250th anniversary, and please come and enjoy the World Cup. Whereas we realize, and particularly immigrant communities realize, that they may come, but there's a real possibility that they may be picked up on their way to the stadium.
They've been
where they-
watching what's going on here.
Yes, yes, and the reality is the why and wherefore of who ICE picks up is basic racial profiling. So, you know, it's not a very safe or nice place for a lot of people. And I think it's important that we use the protest this summer to say to the world that this is not our America, that this administration and the constant insults coming from our president do not define us. And instead that we choose to define ourselves by the Constitution and by the words written on the Statue of Liberty. You know,
And
those, I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off.
I was just going to say, those are at the heart for me, certainly, and I think for a lot of people, of what it truly means to be American.
What is the meaning behind Project World Cup Spotlight? What's the message that you want people to receive and take away from here today?
The message is that we are not anti-soccer, we are not anti-World Cup, we're not anti-FIFA. We understand that people want to go and enjoy the game and or go to a viewing party and watch it with their friends and family members, and that's fine. What we want them to remember is that perhaps, such as the Atlanta Stadium, 3/4 of a mile away is a hold room. In those hold rooms are women, men, children, shackled with no beds, limited bathroom access, not terribly great food. And as you are cheering for your team in Atlanta, they will be able to hear you from the hold room. And that is the stark difference between the two. And that is the important thing, which is, yes, enjoy the game, but we have to try and remember what is happening to people in this country and how wrong it truly is.
How are you applying the lessons learned in New Hampshire, where you're joining us from, where there has been tremendous success alongside Joe Jordan and Representative Thomas? How are you applying those lessons nationally now with Project World Cup Spotlight?
Well, the one main thing that I found out from the New Hampshire campaign was, A, you need to run a very good media campaign, and it's a hell of a lot of work running a good media campaign. And then
Especially
I
in this
realized
era where optics matter so much to this administration. It's
exactly.
all about what it looks like.
It is. And I, you know, my my eyes went to the horizon and I thought, "Oh my Lord, the world's media is coming to us." And they're
Wow.
bringing with them their 5 billion viewers. And we know that there's going to be a lot of people presenting what we view as an untrue version of what's happening to a lot of people in this country. And we want to take that opportunity to say, stop, no. We want you to know that there are some pretty tough things going on, particularly for immigrant communities, and certainly their treatment within these detention facilities. And just make sure that they are remembered and it just doesn't become a big party.
Facilities that are holding people who have not been charged. These are
No,
pretrial detainees. These
yeah,
are not violent offenders. These are equivalent to a misdemeanor. This is not what I think a lot of people, even those that may have signed up for this, so to speak, this is not what they signed up for, Kim.
no. And the reality is that the figures as of now are that only 7% of the people in these facilities have a felony conviction. So 93% of them maybe have a traffic ticket. And I believe of that, only 75% have nothing, not even a traffic ticket. So these people have been living their lives in no way a danger to the society and have been hauled off the streets and put into prisons. Why? And why do we allow this to continue to happen?
That's right. And they're for-profit detention centers. People are the product. There's so much money made off of these individuals that we hear stories where they're asking for voluntary deportation and they're not even being allowed to be deported when they voluntarily sign that paperwork. They can't even be seen in front of a judge. That's part of what we saw in Delaney Hall and why that hunger strike is going on there. We'll get into that in just a little bit here later this hour with Amy Torres, who is there on the ground in New Jersey. I give you the floor here now, though, Kim. What else do you want people to know about Project World Cup Spotlight? Where can they go to learn more about it?
Yes, they can go to our website, which is projectworldcupspotlight.org. And there they can find out information about us. They can find out about the different protests that we're having in cities across the United States and in Mexico as well. And also information about what is happening. We have an Open Letters to the World campaign where we're allowing people from detention facilities to try and get their voices out so that people do actually get to hear firsthand what is happening to people in these facilities with, as Amy, I'm sure will go on with the horrific food and filthy water and just horrible conditions.
Yeah, and denial of basic medical care, what happened to do no harm. You're hearing so many of these things going on. We'll get so much more in detail into that. For those of you that want to learn more about Kim's efforts here and why we are all here, you can go to projectworldcupspotlight.org. It has all the lists of the protests that are scheduled throughout the World Cup, events that you may have in your hometown from Mexico City, Atlanta, Los Angeles, anywhere there's going to be a World Cup match. Project World Cup Spotlight will be there. Thank you so much to Representative Wendy Thomas, as well as Joe Jordan, co-founders of No Ice in New Hampshire. Thank you guys so much for taking the time here today. We really appreciate it. All right, guys, we pivot now. We have another section of this, and we wanted to expand the conversation beyond the Northeast. We wanted to get into globally. Joining us, we have Marco Castillo. He's the co-executive director of Global Exchange, as well as Arthur Wolf. He's an activist on the ground for the 50501 movement in San Francisco. Amy Torres, who we talked about just a little while ago, she's the executive director of the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. Avery Grace Vandenberg, attorney for the UGA School of Law, Community Health Law Partnership, and a man who probably doesn't need much introduction for the crowd here, Representative Ro Khanna, U.S. Congressman from California. Thank you all so much for taking the time here. We want to start with one of the leaders taking the fight across the country here, and that's to you, Marco. We focus on the impact of ICE on the United States, in our soil, but rarely on other countries. I was just in Mexico City during April, and I was there sort of just to see, even on some of the independent editorials there, you have images of Lady Liberty being taken into handcuffs. What is the effect that ICE is having in Mexico, and what message is Mexico City receiving, or rather, what message is trying to be sent by Project World Cup Spotlight to the fans in Mexico City?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, or evening, depending on when you're watching. When we talk about ICE, the conversation often focuses on what happens in the United States, but the reality is that ICE raids and deportations have consequences that extend beyond U.S. borders, affecting families, communities, and entire economies. I want to highlight three major impacts, which is the economic harm, the family separation, and the regional instability that this deportations can cause, and they're actually already causing. In terms of the economic impact in fiscal year 24, ICE deported more than 271,000 people, and by fiscal year 25, that number increased almost to 442,000. Every one of those deportations represent a worker, a parent, a community member who contributed to the local and global economy, and often is the primary source of income for her family. So in many
this
countries,
is the mano de obra in the United States, our working class here, and it seems very evident to us that this is a new type of family separation, going after the heads of households, dismantling the family that way, Marco.
Correct. Many countries in Latin America depend heavily on remittances. Just to give an example, in Mexico received approximately $64 billion in remittances. In other countries like El Salvador, Honduras, or Guatemala, remittances represent almost up to 30% of their GDP. When workers are detained, they lose their jobs, and the financial lifelines for many families across Latin America are disrupted. Families lose money that they need for food, for rent, for healthcare, for education, and for small businesses. Communities that depend on migration as an economic survival strategy experience increased poverty after these deportations. And then next, let me talk about the human cost, which is for us the most important impact. ICE raids and deportations do not affect individuals only, they affect entire families spread across borders. Children may remain in the United States while parents are deported. The most recent reports from ProPublica, for example, said that it is estimated that more than 100,000 kids in the U.S. citizens, have been left without their parents. In those cases, grandparents may suddenly become caregivers. Families can lose their primary breadwinner overnight. And many researchers have documented increase in stress, anxiety, depression, and educational disruption that can last for years and decades. We're causing a generational harm. And finally, deportations can create instability in countries receiving large numbers of returning migrants. Many deportees return to places where economic opportunities are limited, and these can also impact the U.S. ICE raids can also disrupt industries in the U.S. that depend heavily on immigrant labor, including, for example, agriculture, food processing, constructions, and service industries, just like you said it. These disruptions can affect regional supply chains and trade relationships throughout North America. Finally, the key point is that the effects of ICE do not stop at the border. A raid that takes place in New York or LA have an immediate consequences in Oaxaca or San Salvador or Tegucigalpa or Guatemala City and countless communities across the world. So when we discuss immigration enforcement, we must consider not only the number of arrests or deportations, but also the broader human cost and consequence that it has. And that's why we are participating from Mexico City on next Tuesday, June 9th, 2 days before the World Cup begins, in a major action that will bring together organizations and families impacted by these in Mexico City.
We talk about the ripple effect, Marco. We talk about the impact financially that the mano de obra has in the country. They pay into taxes, they pay into Social Security. They just don't get those taxes back. So it's actually, Americans that think that they are more American than those that are actually adding value to the country, like the immigrant labor force, who get the advantages of those that are working hard every single day, countless hours. Donde quiera hay un Latino trabajando duro. Wherever we want, there's a Latino working hard. I ask you this, you talked about the ripple effect. We have a few minutes left with you, a few seconds left with you. It was so evident to me being in Minneapolis. We talk about the immigrant community, but looking into the teachers' eyes, who are mostly white, non-Latino, and seeing the PTS and the trauma in people's eyes they love us, our loved ones, people who intersect with our lives every single day. Talk to us about that, because Mexico, it's just on the other side, right? But as far away as Mexico City, we see these impacts. As far away as down south as the Guatemala border.
Yes, for many families, deportation is not, it's just the beginning of a very deep hell that families might find themselves. Many kids have to drop out from school. Kids that go with their parents to Mexico, for example, struggle to get into school because they don't have proper documents, U.S. documents to enter school in Mexico, and so it's a real pain for families that again can cause so much stress. We are hurting generations to come with what we are doing right now. This is not only about us, the adults, but also the children that are being impacted by this, the future of our region, the way that the U.S. it's putting its leadership, its global leadership, at stake with all these decisions. Communities are resenting, are changing their perception of the United States thanks to this grave mistake.
Changing their perception of what the American dream is. That's one of the things I asked people when I was down in Mexico in April, if they still thought about the American dream. The person I was talking to had no desire to travel north, despite these broader, ideas that every Mexican national wants to come here. Some are very comfortable and happy where they are, and the American dream for a lot of people is dying. Executive Director Michael Castillo with the Global Exchange, thank you so much for taking the time with us. We pivot now to Arthur, another man on the ground here in the West Coast in California. He is part of the 50501 movement in San Francisco. Arthur, thank you so much for taking the time here tonight. ICE appears to be backing off of detention centers, with the exception of those detention centers in California. Can you bring us up to speed about what the reality is going on as you see it?
Yeah, certainly. Not a problem at all. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Project World Cup Spotlight, for allowing me the privilege and the honor to be here. Jumping right into your question, there are two ongoing campaigns at the moment. There is one in Dublin. There was a facility that was closed in 2024 that the federal government is trying to reopen. It is being opposed by local leadership. Of course, it's California. That's what we do. Public comment for a 30-day environmental study was open on May 1st, so it just closed a couple of days ago on June 1st. That is pending the status of the outcome of that. But the demand it's clear. It's clear. It's concise. We do not want the facility to be reopened, and we want the facility to be demolished. It's no longer fit for use. And it would not be safe to have people in there. And I think we were talking about before. It would play into the cruelty of the situation to have something like that reopen. That is not fit for use anymore.
They get very sneaky with the stuff that they're doing too. It's like, these are warehouses, these are data centers. Wait a minute.
100%.
No, these are facilities for 10,000 men, women, and children. And you, the American taxpayer, it's going to come out of your pocket, by the way. And yeah, go ahead.
We're being nice calling them warehouses or detention facilities, because we all know what they actually are. These are places of cruelty. They're basically modern day concentration camps, and it's terrifying what we're doing. I used to think those words, Arthur, were too dramatic. I used to think, okay,
me too. My traditional media training, former CNN correspondent, how could you call them concentration camps? That's reserved for the Holocaust. That's reserved for an era of time that we no longer live in. By technical definition, these are concentration camps. They're concentrating a specific type of population. Not only that, we talked before this got going. I went into Camp East, Montana, and it was because of our reporting that we were able to diagnose a measles outbreak that was going on for 4 months undiagnosed. These are facilities where people are being denied basic human rights on purpose. I don't even have to put in, it seems. This is part of the cruelty.
Yeah, I mean, we saw in El Salvador, when they first opened that facility, we saw representatives go down there and take pictures and stuff, and it was disgusting. So it's not alarmist language or over the top when we say these are places of cruelty, these are concentration camps. The second campaign, which brings us to the second campaign going on in Northern California, it's in Gilroy. So this Ro Khanna will be on later. These facilities would sandwich his area. And it's a brand new one. They just opened up. They started working on the land. The California Attorney General is already in opposition, as well as local leaders. Ultimately, what will really determine how that fight goes against it will be how the federal government decides to open and operate this facility. Because at the end of the day, there are laws in place that if the federal government runs a facility, they are able to do so. But again, to echo our point, our demand is clear. There is no room for ICE here in the Bay, and we want them out. We don't even want them here.
The expansion of the private prison infrastructure should be concerning to anyone here, not just on the left. It should be something on the right that is taken an issue with. On an average year, we have about 40,000 people under any type of administration in custody, in ICE custody. Conservative estimates put those estimates around 60, 70,000 people. President Trump, Arthur, wants to expand this infrastructure maybe to 110, 120,000 beds, and he wants to do it using cities like yours, and you guys are fighting back. Tell us here, while we have you just a few more seconds here, what the blueprint is, what the strategy is, like in New Hampshire, where we heard from State Representative Thomas and Joe Jordan. What has been effective there for 50501 in San Francisco?
Well, the thing for us, it's not just us. It's not just 5051 San Francisco. I get to be the face today, and I'm probably the least knowledgeable person on this. I don't know how I got the roll of the dice to be so lucky, but it's a coalition effort. So shout out to ICE out of Dublin, ICE out of Gilroy, Bay Resistance, all the coalition members, because they are the ones, all the people on the ground that make this happen, that make my appearance here possible. I just want to make sure that I make them proud. But it's one of those things where we fended off an invasion by ICE in October because we coalesced, we prepared, we were ready, and it helped that we didn't have an active facility. We still don't have an active facility in Northern California. So it's one of those things where if we are going to open one or any of these, it puts our most vulnerable people at risk. And this is an area with, primarily Black, brown, queer people. So when we talk about our most vulnerable folks that are the target of the administration, all of these fights are interconnected. So it's one of those things where this is the line that we stand on. But tomorrow, we fight for the power that's being lost to expand the power that our African American community has, and to the protection of our LGBTQ, in particular, our trans allies who are, the focal point now, one of the focal points. So this fight just doesn't stop at keeping ICE out of San Francisco, out of Gilroy, out of the Bay Area as a whole. It's fighting back against this administration, the cruelty, and the rollbacks on the rights of all of our folks. And it's about protecting, como tú dijiste, nosotros somos los que protegemos a nosotros solos. We are the ones who protect
el pueblo
us.
salva al pueblo.
Exactly. We're the ones that keep each other safe,
Amen.
Yeah.
Arthur, thank you so much for taking the time with us. You brought up a great point. That's Arthur from the 50501 San Francisco movement. We pivot now to Amy Torres, where I was just at in New Jersey. You're coming to us from there. It's so evident to us, and something that Arthur brought up, the targeting of the most vulnerable. When I was there at Delaney Hall, it was so clear that either it was a written down order or just a strategy that they applied, that they were going to go after the smaller, more vulnerable people, and that included going after and targeting women. What's going on in New Jersey? Have you heard about that? I saw it with my own eyes. I'd love for you to speak about what is going on today.
Sure, Nick. Thank you so much for having me. So, Amy Torres, Executive Director with New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. We're New Jersey's largest immigration coalition, but just as Arthur, I'm here as one person on this call because there are other people on the ground actively right now. There are some people getting released. There are families who are trying to visit and learn more about how they can get to their loved ones inside. So I just really want to give shout outs and props to Eyes on ICE. This is a collaborative that has been on the ground actually before Delaney Hall even opened, because to your point about the ways in which the private prison industry has wrapped their tentacles around our politics, we heard about Geo Group opening Delaney Hall not because of any notice that they gave to the city or anything like that, but because on an earnings call, they announced it. And so we had folks in the middle of winter camping out outside of Delaney Hall, waiting to see which contractors were going in, which construction trucks were going in. And that has evolved into the beautiful collaborative that you see today, offering mutual aid for families who are going in to visit folks or folks that are being released. But you asked, Nick, about the most vulnerable. And it is very clear, and it should be clear to everyone listening to this call, that there is no value set that ICE or DHS follows. We're talking about an agency that was formed in a post 9/11 nationalist environment, right? This was a time where we collectively were using language that dehumanized and othered people from other countries, that cast doubt on their trustworthiness and their belonging, and really shed a lot of the humanity that this country was supposed to be or purported to be built on. And now, having this agency that's formed in that era and all of the autonomy that it was given, right, because of the heightened homeland security concerns, even just remembering the language is kind of like triggering, right? Protecting the homeland. What does that mean when immigrants are the fastest growing population in the country? But anyway, it's very clear that this is not something that happened with a 2016 election. This is not something that happened with a 2024 election. We have had decades of talking about immigrants in this way. So it's not shocking to me that they're going after women, that they're going after the elderly or the chronically ill or the young people, because it wasn't that long ago that they were going after caravans of chain migration. It wasn't that long ago that they were going after anchor babies,
It
right?
wasn't that long ago that I was in Border Patrol facilities seeing children that would never be reunited with their parents again because they'd been separated deliberately as a matter of policy by our current president during
Yeah,
his first administration.
exactly. And
If you're
so,
just joining us, you are listening right now to Amy Torres. She's the executive director of the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, and we are in a special report here, Fighting Back ICE, where we are highlighting Project World Cup and the spotlight that they are putting on ahead of the World Cup here, the events, the protests, and this is in collaboration with the 5051 movement. Amy, it was awful to see the DHS secretary say the hunger strike at Delaney Hall is just because they want their ethnic food. And don't they know that the protesters outside are standing up for murderers and pedophiles and criminals? I will say this from this journalist's perspective, no one is standing up for the pedophiles or the murderers. I don't think anyone wants to live next door to them. The fact of the matter is, though, that you have most of those people in there are nonviolent offenders who have done nothing wrong other than somebody made a law a long time ago and said, this is the US, this is Mexico, you cross it, you're all of a sudden illegal, which is so dehumanizing. Tell
right,
us more
or
about what
in many
bothers you.
instances, someone made a law yesterday, and when you status before, you suddenly don't have it anymore. Even when you followed all of the rules, even when you did everything right, it can be ripped away in a second because we don't really have policy making in this country anymore. We have punditry, right? We have politicians who want to just be able to go after what they see as this enemy, but is really an invisible force, right? There is no migrant horde, there is no like mass criminal network or conspiracy. But I do want to say that there are people in detention for a variety of reasons. But if we believe that no one should be thrown away simply because they lack paperwork, we should also believe that no one should be thrown away and jailed forever simply because they, right? We have an overly punitive system in our criminal legal system, which is already rife with a lot of racial disparities. Even as awful as that is, and we all remember this from 2020 and the national conversations we were having around race, that sets the ceiling for what our immigration system is. So things that are happening in Delaney Hall, they are allowed. They're not new. This has been decades in the making. There are things that I'd love to ask folks to do is one, look up your local bond fund. We need to get families and we need to get people out, and we need to get families united as quickly as possible. Bonds have skyrocketed. Here in New Jersey, we have an amazing fund called First Friends of New York and New Jersey. World Cup is coming here. It's coming to New York. It's actually coming here. The stadium is here. And just as in other places, it's a stone's throw from Delaney Hall. We really need to make sure that people inside right now are released and that no one is going in after we get everyone out. The last thing that I want to
Amy, I'm
ask
so,
is,
yeah, oh,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead. If you just said really quick, got to get on to our next guest here.
yeah, is that, show up where you are. You don't need to bus over to New Jersey to protest detention. There's probably a detention facility in your hometown. Call your politicians, right? Call your members of Congress and demand that they are not giving a single penny more to DHS.
Amy Torres, the executive director with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, where it is ground zero right now in the resistance movement and the fight against President Trump's mass deportation policy. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. You bring up about legality not being morality. And in that spirit, we want to talk to Avery Grace Vandenberg. She's an attorney with the UGA School of Law Community Health Law Partnership, and it's a client of hers that is suing based on the constitutionality of her detention. Avery, I just want to give you the floor. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. Tell us about what's going on and what your case is that you have.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. Thank you for giving me the time. I know we're a little limited on time. I just want to reiterate there are incredibly important fundamental rights at stake for those who have been detained at ICE. And I want to use the time I have actually to share the story of a client who has endured several years of immigration detention. Her name's Pauline. She's a mother, she's a daughter, a sister, a survivor, and she's currently detained in the Stewart Detention Center. But Pauline's story actually begins when she was just 2 years old, which is the age when she entered the US from her native country of Cameroon. She came with her family, who raised her in the Carolinas. Pauline has lived in the US for 34 years. In fact, Pauline grew up believing she was a US citizen until she was served by ICE with a charging document ordering her to appear in immigration court after a juvenile arrest at 17 years old. That arrest meant that she would begin a decades-long immigration journey fighting for her right to stay in the US. And at the same time she was first interacting with ICE, she also was experiencing her first abusive relationship, what would become one of many in her life. Pauline was ultimately detained in 2017, and she was taken to the Irwin County Detention Center in Osceola, Georgia. She spent 2 years there, litigating her right to stay in the US from within the confines of Irwin until 2019, which is when Pauline began experiencing intense abdominal pain and uterine cramping. She sought medical advice from a doctor that had been contracted by ICE. And it's been widely reported that Pauline needed one surgery to alleviate her symptoms, but a different surgery was performed upon her, resulting in the removal of part of her fallopian tube. She says she did not consent to that procedure, and when she woke, she was allegedly told she would no longer be able to conceive naturally. And even more disturbing, it has been widely reported that Pauline was not the only one who experienced non-consensual medical procedures done to them at Irwin. At great risk of personal harm, Pauline began speaking out about her experiences and lifting the voices of fellow detainees who had been harmed. And to Pauline, justice was important. She did not want what had happened to her to happen to anybody else. She spoke to dozens of reporters, she testified to Congress, to federal agencies, and she very bravely shared her story with the world. She was released in September of 2020 after serving nearly 3 years in Irwin and in immigration detention facilities. And after her release, she and her US citizen daughter moved to Pauline's sister's house in Maryland so she could have a fresh start. But instead, she met her abusive ex-partner, someone who subjected Pauline to immense physical, sexual, emotional violence. And Pauline escaped only after years of police reports, petitions for restraining orders, multiple criminal indictments of her abuser, and after some time, she settled in South Carolina with her daughter and her parents. And I wish I could say her story ends there, but unfortunately, ICE redetained her and has held her in Stewart Detention Center since December of 2025. Detention is still traumatic for Pauline. She avoids medical care out of fear that she could once again be harmed, and she's currently challenging the legality of her detention in federal court. And it's our belief as her attorneys that the way in which ICE detained her and the length of her detention is unconstitutional and contrary to Supreme Court precedent. Other courts across the country are also turning their attention to detention procedures. There's a court in California that just issued a preliminary injunction reinstating previous policies that protect immigrant survivors of domestic violence like Pauline, including reviving former policies that say, absent serious factors, release from detention is appropriate. And I want to end with, you asked about stakes. For many, including Pauline, the stakes could not be higher. If Pauline loses in court, it's likely she will be deported to a country she has no real memories of, no family in, no support therein. She faces persecution, even death in her home country based on her sexuality and status as a monolingual English speaker. Pauline truly embodies the word survivor. She has survived her entire life. She's survived years of immigration detention, a non-consensual and medically unindicated surgery done to her. She survived years of abuse from multiple relationships, and now Pauline is fighting to survive this as well. So today we've renewed our request to ICE that Pauline be released from detention. I want to uplift my colleagues at UndocuBlack, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, Black LGBTQIA Migrant Project. They've organized a campaign for her release, and I would ask that you join them. Ask your congresspeople, ask ICE, call for Pauline to be released so she can be reunited with her family and continue to heal from all that she's been through. Thank you.
God bless you, Avery, and God bless Pauline. Thank you so much for taking the time to give us that story. It's one of many stories just highlighting the cruelty. And we want to pivot now to Representative Ro Khanna. Representative, as a matter of policy, under the Trump administration, what has changed among the many things is that pregnant women are taken into custody. At Delaney Hall, there was at least 3 pregnant women in custody. Prior to this call, I talked to Jocelyn Hernandez. Her brother-in-law, Carlos Mendoza, was part of the viral video that was posted by local station KCRA that showed him being shot by an ICE agent multiple times. Jocelyn tells me that her brother-in-law, his body is rejecting bullets still, and he's still not getting the basic medical treatment. I guess I want to start here, Representative. What happened to do no harm? What happened to doctors in these facilities taking the Hippocratic Oath? What else bothers you about what you're hearing inside?
Well, I've been to the California City Detention Center, the largest detention center in California, and I was horrified. I was in a room with about 60 detainees. There was no security guard, no prison warden. So obviously they pose no security risk. And one person said he had blood in his urine, had been denied medical care for 10 days. Another person said that they had rocks in their food. A third person said that they were shivering at night and were not given a blanket or any warm clothes. These conditions are inhumane. They will be seen like the internment camps were seen during the Japanese concentration internment camps time. It is just awful. And one thing I want us to be honest about, the Democrats, when so many Democrats voted for Laken Riley, that was shameful. That was a betrayal of our values. That was giving Donald Trump permission to say you can engage in mass deportation, mass detention without due process, that you can pick someone off the street because they may be Latino, maybe because they may be in a low-income profession, and say they committed shoplifting, say they committed a minor crime, and you don't have to give them due process. You can just arrest and charge them and deport them. What do we need now? We need to show the courage that Wendy Thomas and a lot of people in New Hampshire showed in taking on the ICE facility. Abolish ICE. It cannot stand. It needs to be abolished and replaced. And we need a new agency that's under Justice Department, and not a single new dollar can be going to this ICE agency.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Representative, because it was under Democratic President Obama that the private prison infrastructure expanded, but it has been all gas, no brakes under President Trump. There are Democratic lawmakers who say their hands are tied because there's no power in numbers. And when I was talking to Representative Mendoza outside of Delaney Hall, he was allowed in when the Democratic New Jersey governor was not. Members of Congress are allowed in because they appropriate the money for these facilities. That begs the question, why aren't more Democratic representatives knocking on these doors for, at the very least, posterity? Why aren't more people like you joining calls like this and doing more? What's your message to your Democratic peers who aren't doing enough?
Well, I was speaking on the House floor and opposing funding, and then I met with constituents of mine, and they said, Mr. Congressman, have you gone to one of the detention facilities? And I said, no, I've been outside. I haven't gone in. And they said, why not? Why aren't you in there? It's not enough for you to be voting. It's not enough for you to give speeches. So I said, well, thank you for saying that. And I then said to my staff, we're going to try to get into that California City detention. It took 2 months, but you know what? Because we appropriate the money, because we have some say, they let us in. Every single member should be trying to get into these California detention city centers. Why? Because then when I went there, now I can tell their stories, and I have a platform. And Delia Ramirez, one of my colleagues, she organized a forum where she had some of the people who have been illegally detained testify. I was heartbroken. There was a mother who was detained, who was sent to Honduras, and she had a 3-year-old toddler, and that 3-year-old toddler is dead. The mother begged for the son, but they did not bring the son to her, and it ended up being a family member who committed abuse and killed the toddler. We are seeing a humanitarian catastrophe. When people say, how did we live through McCarthyism? How did we live through segregation? How did we live through Japanese internment? Now we know this is how you live through it. We're living through it now. And the problem is that not many of us are in these centers. We're not seeing the pain, but it is a shameful chapter in our history.
And it seems as though, at least from the administration, it's a battle of optics and sometimes downright propaganda. DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin saying that these detainees are pissed off because they don't want to get their ethnic food. It's these, not so veiled racist comments from members of our administration that make it seem like it's okay to do things like this, or it's something that should be celebrated. I know that we're not going to convince people who are morally maybe not so allowed to push from where their position is, but there is such wasteful spending here in these facilities. Can you talk about that stories of people who are voluntarily asking for deportation but not allowed to leave because these private prison companies are making hand over fist and bragging about it on earnings calls. I mean, what's being done about Geo Group, CoreCivic, Damon Hinninger, George Zoli, LaSalle Management? What about those guys?
Well, you're absolutely right. They're in it to make a profit, and that's why they were not giving proper food. That's why they didn't have proper medical treatment. That's why they didn't have the proper clothing. It wasn't just gratuitous cruelty. I mean, there is gratuitous cruelty in Stephen Miller's policy because he wants there to be a deterrent. I don't believe that private prison was gratuitous cruelty. I believe they're basically being inundated with new detainees because there's a quota system under Miller. So you got to have 2,000 every day. And they don't want to hire more doctors, nurses, food providers, or care providers. And so you have literally people being denied healthcare, denied food, denied decency. And I met a number of people saying this was what was so painful. Deport us, just deport us. And there's a backlog. They can't get an appointment with a judge to get the permission to be deported. But think of what it comes to when you've lived here for 10 years, 15 years, you have family here, and you're saying, just have mercy, deport me. I can't stay in the conditions that you have me in. That's what is happening in this country. And so we need to be honest about the political opportunism that took place when Trump won and the vote on Lake and Raleigh, and say never again can we compromise those values. As a son of immigrants, this is personal for me. I have family. My parents came here as immigrants. I have so many families members who are immigrants. I see the life through the lens of someone who is an immigrant, who's hardworking, who just wants to make a better life, who's just trying to provide a better set of opportunities for their kids. And we need to be very clear, abolish ICE and replace it. And not, okay, let's tinker with it, let's reform it. Just come out and say it. It's an agency that has gone rogue. We need a new agency under human rights. And we cannot give $1 until Trump is president, not another dollar for this agency. And I know these are simple things, but if all Democrats in the House and Senate were to just agree to that simple platform, I feel like we would make headway.
Yeah, and if you're just joining us, you're listening to Representative Ro Khanna of California, California congressman who is fighting back against ICE, and that's the theme of what we're talking about here, our fight back against ICE, and highlighting Project World Cup, the spotlight on that, and exactly what we're doing with this project. Representative, my final question to you, do you see any merit in when people say that Democrats didn't do enough to insulate the immigrant community from the abuse that they're seeing and that we're seeing right now? I guess I ask this because I don't want this to happen again. Legality does not equal morality. And I hear that in my conversations from New Jersey all the way to California, is that what did the Democrats miss here in protecting our community from the type of abuse that we're seeing right now?
Well, let's just be honest. When Trump won the swing states, all the swing state senators voted for Lake and Raleigh. We said we were talking about how we missed on immigration. I mean, we gave the permission structure to Trump to say, okay, the due process doesn't matter. If I call someone a criminal, then it doesn't matter if there's no due process. And let's be honest, we have not made progress on immigration for decades. We couldn't even get the Dreamers proper status under President Biden. And I'm for citizenship, but how about just at least getting legalization? You know, most people come here, they don't first think about voting. They just think about like not being in the shadows and having a paycheck and not having rated.
Yes.
We haven't even been able to get that. So obviously there's skepticism in this community amongst immigrants and people who've come here saying, I hear this comprehensive immigration reform every 2 to 4 years, and then nothing happens when they're in power. And I guess for me, this is not an intellectual matter. You know, like I said, my parents came here as immigrants. I've seen immigrant communities. I represent immigrant communities. It's personal. And I think that's what we need in this Democratic Party. People for who this issue is personal. We're going to say immigrants are part of the fabric of this country. They enrich this country. They contribute to this country. And when we're in power, we're going to fight for their dignity and their status, and we're not going to sell them out.
Representative Ro Khanna, we really appreciate your rigorous honesty. I've heard you and seen you speak many times, but this is the first time I've had the pleasure of interviewing you, and you answered every question that I had. You had no idea what I was going to ask you either. So I'm just really grateful.
Well, Nick, thank you for your leadership. And I heard some of the other panelists and Amy and others and Avery, and I'm just so grateful to all of you, and Arthur and 50501 and of course Wendy Thomas and what they did in Merrimack. Incredible. And it's that's where my faith comes in, for people like you.
God bless you, Congressman. We really appreciate you taking the time. You've
Thank
been
you.
watching Fighting Back Against ICE, where we are spotlighting and putting the spotlight on our new initiative here, Project World Cup Spotlight, led by Kim Herdman Shapiro. It's out of New Hampshire, and you heard this whole hour a host of guests who have been putting and taking the fight literally to the front lines. I got to say this, I'm looking at the gallery here, and God bless the women, because I've seen with my own eyes on the front lines, it's women who are leading the way. It's women who are really sacrificing their bodies. There are so many people who are sacrificing, using their privileges, using their platform. I'm coming to you live here from vacation. This is not something that we're doing for financial gain. This is something that we truly believe that there's no other side to humanity. Part of the difference between traditional media and independent media is I'm not just honest, I'm rigorously honest. And to me, the distinction of that is that we are all shaped by our personal spirit, strength, and hope. We all have a bias. There's no such thing as objectivity. I truly believe that the conversation with immigration should start at amnesty. And we heard there from Representative Ro Khanna, it seems at times that our immigration system is deliberately broken, that there are too many people, or maybe just a few people, making too much money off a lot of people because it is expensive to be poor in this country. And people who are vulnerable seem to be the targets of this administration because, as we have heard the last hour, cruelty is the point under Trump 2.0. There's no other way to slice it. There's no other way to look at it. What we've seen here, these not so veiled racist remarks from members of the cabinet saying that these hunger strikes that we're seeing take hold across the country, from Adelanto in California to Delaney Hall, Whipple, Broadview, all across the country, Alligator Alcatraz, this movement is being led at this point from the inside out. It's people that are showing up to support the detained inside, the survivors inside, who are dealing with maggots in their food, chewy milk, food that doesn't even qualify as sustenance, that you wouldn't even give scraps to a dog on the street. And you know what? They're also being denied basic medical care and services, despite a Hippocratic oath that doctors and nurse practitioners take in this country to do no harm. We're hearing countless stories like this of people saying, we need help. And the doctors there at these facilities say, you'll get it if you just deport yourself back to the country you came from. It's awful, which is why we're taking the time out of our days to talk to you about what we're seeing on the front lines, why cruelty is the point, and why we believe, like at our platform at Nick Valencia News, that solo el pueblo salva al pueblo. Only the people will save each other. This isn't a left or right issue. It shouldn't be. This isn't a red or blue issue. It shouldn't be. This is a top versus bottom. This is the realization that we know people in certain zip codes in this country get screwed all the time, but it's now more and more zip codes like yours and mine who are feeling the burn in this country. And when it comes to journalism, you could judge how open and free a democracy is based on how open and free the press is. And the fact of the matter is, right now, people like me and my colleagues like Don Lemon, Jim Acosta, the countless other independent journalists who are helping carrying water for this country, it's us who are feeling singled out. So if there's anything that you heard here tonight that you would like to support more of, please donate to us. Donate to 50501. You can go on my page, nickvalencianews.com, and help us continue these conversations, because really, it's only the people that save each other. Solo el pueblo salva al pueblo. Thank you guys so much for taking the time with us tonight. It was my honor to be part of this discussion. To Kim Shapiro, to Kimberly, I can't say your last name and I'm not going to mess it up, but God bless you. Demert, I think, Demert, I messed that up. I know I messed it up, but I'm just so grateful that you would think of me to host this and to moderate this discussion. To Amy Torres, Karsh behind the scenes, Avery, Joe, Representative Khanna, Marco, Castillo, and Arthur, everyone else, and anyone who I missed, and all of you watching at home. Thank you so, so much for this. If you want to learn more about this project, go to projectworldcupspotlight.org. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Nick.
I got a lot to say.